Hello, I'm Pearl Howie, and welcome to Authentic Success Your Way. I hear all the time from people how much they want to go on retreat, so I thought I would bring you to the wonderful Crouchers Orchards Hotel. It's still early, the sun is still coming up, and they're serving breakfast still. But it's a beautiful place to come and take some time out to relax. This is a series of 7 videos, a journey, even what you might call a retreat, a way, a pilgrimage, a Camino. We're going to go to the beach, we're going to go down to the woods, and we're going to find some places in nature where you can relax, let go, and feel safe to feel your own feelings. I've been one of those people that has had success, or what I might call a notion of success. The time when I had the flat, the car, the job, the friends, the parties. But inside, I felt like I was dying. I felt like I was living what we call a living death, because I wasn't letting myself do any of the things that I loved. I wasn't writing, I wasn't dancing, I wasn't being me. I wasn't making films. So sometimes our authentic success is just about opening up to the things that we have closed off. Sometimes it's about making big changes. Sometimes just very tiny adjustments to where we are. But we often feel that we need something else because we know things are just not quite in alignment. Now, I've studied with Native American shaman, and the ancient shaman all knew the truth that the answers are within you. So these exercises, these workshops are just about reflecting back to you what you know inside. So you don't have to do them all, you don't have to do them in order, but they are practices that I have used for many years to find my own way to my authentic success. And we're also going to talk about fear of success. And one thing I have learned is that every single person will face fear of success in their lives. It's the most normal thing in the world. So I hope you'll use these videos as a retreat if you're not able to come away and go on a retreat with me right now. Perhaps one day you will join me here at Crouchers Orchards or another retreat, or find another one that is perfect for your needs. I hope these videos will help you to find your own way, and that I see you down the road on both our ways. Namaste, and I hope you enjoy. See you at the end of the road. Hi, I'm Pearl Howie, and welcome to Authentic Success Analysis. So it's great if you've done the first 2 workshops, the Authentic Success Awareness, and you've done the dip as well. Because what you have then is you have that experience of trying something new, dipping your toe in, and how it felt to do that. Because as much as we can sit and read books and talk about well-being and even come and do workshops in beautiful hotels and retreats and all kinds of things, a lot of the time we're just thinking about things. Maybe we're doing some yoga, maybe we're doing some meditation, but we're not actually taking that action. And it's when we take the action that we can finally feel how it feels to do something, to taste it. Until we do that, it's all theory. So what we're going to do in this workshop, in this part of our virtual retreat, is to look deeper at those feelings Now, if you haven't done those workshops, that's fine, because guess what? You still have feelings. And so we can use whatever's coming up, and this workshop might be the best one to do first for you. That's okay. What we're going to do is analyze the feelings, look deeper at those feelings. And this is also what we can call exploration, exploring what's going on for us, where those feelings come from, why we have them, and also what we can do about them. A lot of the time when we deal with authentic success, things come up like guilt. Why do I get to do all this fun stuff when other people don't? Or anger, even stages of grief, things like that. Anger at ourselves, that's taken us so long to get there. I know I've definitely had that. And so sometimes we need to work on a little bit of forgiveness, something like that. Don't forget, as well as these workshops, there's also so much material that I've created. Books, a book about forgiveness, 7 books about 7 spiritual principles. So if you find you need more, just please remember there is so much more out there from me and from so many other teachers, okay? And that's what's wonderful about exploration, because as we go out, we find all these things and we find what works for us, even if it's something that doesn't work for anybody else. And I love coming to the beach. I love living down here because, it's a place where I come that just supports me. It just helps me heal. And there are people in my life that are like that as well. Sometimes it takes a while to find the right people, the right tools, the right ways of supporting ourselves. I know it was only my 3rd psychotherapist where I really felt like I made a lot of headway. And it's really important to look around to find what supports you while doing this work. These are some fantastic, really important tools and principles and ways of working that I'm sharing with you. But sometimes you're going to need a little bit more. And I think it's a little bit like doing DIY when we're doing these workshops. And I'm doing a lot of DIY at my mum's house. And there comes a point where I think, no, it's beyond me and I need a professional. And we start sort of casting around to find, okay, who's somebody who can get up one of them really big ladders? So if you feel that you need this, take the time to look around for other support services. If you want some advice and support, you can contact us as well through the emails and things like that. And I also have a book which has got 500 types of healing, and it's got names of also other great teachers that you can access through their books, through their videos, all kinds of things. There are even places like Plum Village in France where I went to do some work with Thich Nhat Hanh's Buddhist community, and I went for a day to learn from them, and that was something that was really valuable and really important to me. And I will tell you as well that although it cost me a bit to get there and stay outside of the village, to go there for a day was really just a donation of 30 euros. So a lot of this stuff, the very best people, the best healers in the world are often much more accessible than our ego will let us believe. So reaching out for help and support is also a great practice, very, very powerful. And so if you start to feel that you need that, reach out, get that support. When I did my Camino around the world, even when I was doing my Camino in Spain and Portugal, so often I had to reach out. I was walking most of the way. Every so often I would have to call a taxi, or somebody would send a taxi to kind of pick me up. The place I was staying would come and pick me up or send a taxi because I'd got lost and I couldn't make it there by myself. Listen to your heart and reach out for what serves you. So when we're doing analysis, whether we're doing it as part of a workshop like this, or perhaps you're just sitting chatting with a mate about what's going on in your life and how you feel. Perhaps you're talking about really complex questions or complex philosophies and ideas. I know that lately I seem to be surrounded with people talking about things in really complex phrases, and I keep saying, what do all these words mean? And sometimes analysis gets like that. It gets a little bit too cerebral, a little bit too up here. So it's also important to understand that as much as we look into issues, problems, whatever's going on for us, we don't always have to understand a problem in order to solve it. Okay? Sometimes we do. Sometimes we need to figure out exactly what's going on. I know I definitely have that in my mind when I like to explore fear of success and what happens here and why did that go on and what's going on there. But sometimes the best way that we can overcome anything is just by living into the solution. So we just start moving forward. Again, talking about the camino, about your way, your path. Sometimes we get so caught up with something that we don't realize that if we just go, we just start moving and we move forward, that problem that seems so huge and so big at the time, when we look back, is going to be distant on the horizon. And with that perspective, we'll also be able to understand, oh, getting out of that was really actually quite easy if we just let ourselves go. So if you like, there's an exercise we can do together now, and it's called recapitulation. And that's basically the same as a recap that we have in a TV series or a movie when it explains, what's happened before. But in this example, we're going to use the story of our own lives. We're going to use the events of our own lives. Just get comfortable if you want to do this with me now. Just relax. Come back to your body. Come back to your breath. It's a very simple practice, but it can bring up some very powerful emotions. And you may remember in awareness, I talked about stalking your reactions. And this is similar. But what we're going to do is we're replaying past events. And we're going to focus on the feelings, whatever comes up when we're looking at our actions or other people's actions, okay? And you could take something annoying, painful, boring, that's okay. It's all a practice. Sometimes we can do this at the end of each day and recapitulate our day and look at where we might have done things differently, or why we did things, or look at perhaps why we got upset about something. And we can even use the little journey you took, the dip, and look at what happened as you went to take the dip, what your reactions were, what your emotions were. So as we replay the story, calmly, peacefully, pay attention to your actions, your reactions. Look at the story you're telling yourself about what happened. Look at the facts, the details. As you replay the events in your mind, look at the truth and look also at the assumptions. Look at anywhere you've twisted your own story around, or you've paid attention to other people twisting your story. And we can look at where our old beliefs, our old ideas perhaps took us on a path that wasn't right for us, or where we took that story to mean that we should keep behaving the same way even when it isn't right for us anymore. We can look at the labels that we've given ourselves or others have given us. Stories, ideas about who we are. The quiet one, the clever one, the pretty one, the smart one. Where do those ideas come from? And can we let them go if we want to? As we go through, we can find wherever in our lives we've gone in a direction because of something that wasn't true, or we read facts and events in a way that told a story that wasn't true. When I did this exercise in Mexico with Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., it was very powerful. And what I realized was where I had twisted around events in my life, where I had taken ideas and things I'd been told as a child, and I had learned not to use my voice, not to speak up, because it was important to keep secrets. It was important to not talk about my life and my feelings and my truth. And those are the kind of things that we can learn through a process of recapitulation, where we have created limiting beliefs, where we have fallen into a habit of behavior that we just don't want to have anymore. And what I want to share with you now are 4 very special midi healings. One of them is grief, so it's something that's going to affect everybody at some point in their life. So it's sometimes very handy to have those little, you could call them tools or just life practices that we can use when things are difficult and things are dark, and we need to know how to support ourselves as we go through. It's funny how many things we learn at school and we don't learn about things like this. I know that when I was a kid I had to deal with a lot of this, and I just couldn't, because I didn't know how to. And I think it's good for me to look back and accept that as a child it just was impossible for me to deal with the really big life things that were coming up for me when I was little. It took me a long time to figure that out and to free myself from the pain of not being able to handle things when I was much younger. So I want to give you these tools. I think they're really useful, and you can put them in your pocket if they don't seem to be relevant to you right now. That's okay. But you know where they are and you know what they are. And sometimes they're even useful for other things that can come up when we're dealing with going towards our authentic success, our fear of success. Sometimes things like just feeling like we're never going to get there. Sometimes it's useful to have these kind of mantras, or just this kind of practice where you can create your own mantra, your own way of dealing with what is going on for you. Okay, so I want to go a little bit deeper into the associated disorder and then give you the mantra as well. Okay, are you ready? Just remember, this kind of stuff, we can call it a disorder, we can call it an issue. It's just life stuff that happens probably to most people at some point in their lives. Okay, first one I'm going to talk about is survivor guilt. Now, we can have this for all kinds of reasons. Even if we just see something on the TV where we see there's a disaster in another part of the world, and it can really get into our minds and say, why should I enjoy life? Why should I enjoy life when so many other people are not able to have the basics? And it's a really, really good question. But what we can say is that not enjoying our life doesn't help other people. Perhaps we want to do something to help them, and that's great. You know, I'm not saying you shouldn't help other people, of course. But what I'm saying is that not enjoying our life doesn't help anybody else, okay? And this is something that's very, very common with people who are carers. So often I'm a carer, and often when I'm doing stuff for the people I love, I feel really good. And then when I come away and try and have my me time, my self-care, my self-love, do the things that I want, I find it very challenging because I feel guilty that they can't do it with me. And the best people to help me in that situation is usually the people I care for. When I talk to them about it, they say, yeah, go ahead, go do it, go have fun. And the mantra I use when I feel that survivor guilt coming up, and you can use this even when you have people that you feel guilt about that you can't talk to. And the mantra I use is, it's not my fault, it's not my fault, it's not my fault. And people will say, okay, that survivor guilt is useless. Absolutely. But I still get it coming up from time to time. And that's my way of releasing it, letting it go. So that I can remember it's okay for me to enjoy my life. It's okay for me to do the things that are authentic to me, even if the people I love aren't able to do that. Okay? So the second one I want to talk about is grief and complicated grief. Now, it sounds like I'm sort of saying that normal grief is simple and, but we all know that even if we have something, even if we have a sort of simple grief, it can be overwhelming, it can take over our whole lives. It can make it impossible for us to even function physically. If you've never had to grieve for anyone before, it might surprise you to know that sometimes we get really physical senses. So we get really cold, we get aches in our bones, all kinds of things, lots of what we could call psychosomatic. But as we know, we are mind, body, and spirit. So that grieving affects our whole being. And we go through stages of grief, denial, and we go through these in different orders at times. We go through anger, we go through bargaining, we go through depression, and then we finally come to acceptance. Now, we don't necessarily go through every single stage, but knowing those stages is very helpful to understanding why we might suddenly have so much anger, because it's part of the process of going through that grief. Now, what often happens with complicated grief is that for various reasons, we find it difficult or even impossible to deal with grieving. And very often what happens is we get stuck in a thing called denial, that first stage, which is a very, very powerful stage. And it's very important because it protects us from trying to deal with all our grieving in one day. Very often it's like a cycle. We go round, round, and each time we kind of feel that loss a little bit more. And another thing to remember is that grief doesn't just have to be about somebody dying. It could be about losing a job. It could be about your own health. It could be about a relationship where it's just changing the type of relationship. So it's quite common for parents to feel grief as their children get older, as they do wonderful things like go to university, get married, have children, but the relationship is changing. And for a lot of parents, they feel like they're losing their child because they're growing up. But what happens with complicated grief, as I said, is we get stuck in that denial stage often. Perhaps we get stuck in depression. Perhaps we get stuck in anger, or even in bargaining. And bargaining, it has a lot, and I haven't spoken about this before so much. It has a lot to do with fear of success, because sometimes when we go through grief and complicated grief, we have that sense of bargaining. If I do this, then I won't lose my job. If I do this, then somehow that person who's died will come back to me. And we kind of make these little bargains. And sometimes we do it without even knowing about it. Sometimes we just promise to be good. And we then have things going on that are telling us what it is to be good. What if I do all my studying, if I get the best grades, if I if I get the best place in university, then somehow it will resolve the situation. But guess what? Most of the time, maybe all the time, it doesn't. Because that loss has usually already happened. Okay? And when I talk about complicated grief, I often talk about my father, who died when I was young, and I didn't know him very well. We were estranged. And I just had no way of dealing with that. And the best way of describing it, is really that I put all my love for him in a big black iron trunk, and I just locked it all up there, kept it there, because I just couldn't open it up. I couldn't take anything out of it because I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle the feelings. I didn't know how to love him and lose him, and deal with who he had been, come to terms with who he was as a person. It took me a long time to understand that it's okay to love people and to grieve for them, even if they're not a great person, even if they're a troubled, complicated person. It doesn't make us a bad person if we love and grieve for somebody who we might call bad, or who has been behaving badly to us. And that's something that comes up again and again when I'm doing this well-being spiritual work. But the important thing I've found with that complicated grief is just to start, to get out of denial. And the denial that I had when I was younger was, I don't care. I don't care, I don't care, I don't care. I don't care about my dad. I don't care that he's dead. I don't care about any of this. And it was such a big, big lie. And so when I finally got to that stage of starting to deal with it, it really kind of hit me. And I think it was a fourfold mantra that I used, or threefold, which was, I love my dad. I miss my dad. My dad died. And I needed to use that over and over again to keep me moving out of that denial. The thing that kept saying in my mind, I don't care, I don't care, I don't care. Because of course I did. And when we tell ourselves lies like that, such big lies, it messes us up. It messes up the way that we feel, because that's a lie, it's not true. And then everything else just doesn't make sense. So the more we uncover the truth about who we are, our own authenticity, our authentic success, the more truthful we are, the easier it becomes. Because what we're doing is we're not lying to ourselves, and we're not having to kind of cover up those lies to ourselves. So that, for me, was a very, very important one, and it really opened me up to go out there and start to love and live and do all the things I wanted to. Because when we do what we love, when we are authentic, it breaks the lies. And sometimes that causes us trouble because we've been living a lie. Okay, there's two more. One is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, there's a lot of talk about this at the moment, and it's very interesting. Somebody brought something to my attention, which is complex PTSD. But I'm just going to stick with simple PTSD, because like simple grief, it can be overwhelming. And one of the things that we've learned about PTSD is that although we often think about it as being about soldiers in wartime, what happens is the younger somebody is when they experience trauma, and of course quite logically how severe that trauma is, the harder it is for them to get over that PTSD. And I will say that I have suffered from PTSD, and the interesting thing for me and for a lot of people is that because it was quite young when I experienced that trauma, I buried it. And so I didn't have what you would call, you could call maybe active PTSD, like my grief for my dad. It was kind of buried. What I didn't realize is that it was getting in the way every single day because I was guarding it, I was protecting it. I did not want that PTSD to awaken. I didn't want to have those feelings. I was so scared. I didn't even know I was scared. I'd hidden it so well from myself. One of the things that happens as we live into our authenticity, our authentic success, we start doing these wonderful things. We start feeling our feelings. And that fear does not stay buried. It will come up. We have to feel the fear. We have to feel our feelings. We have to say hello before we can say goodbye. But the wonderful thing that I've discovered is that, like grief, PTSD has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So when we are going through it, it feels like it's never ending. It feels the most appalling condition. It feels, and often it's mixed up with other things as well. But a lot of it is just allowing ourselves to feel those feelings that we repressed, that we were not able to feel when we were younger. Not because we weren't strong, not because we weren't brave, but because it was just impossible for us. And so our being, our mind, body, spirit did what it did to protect us, which is just to push it all down. So we couldn't feel those feelings. And we get to a stage when we're doing enough of this work, enough well-being work, personal growth, personal development, that we can feel strong enough to deal with it. Okay? And so in a way, when we deal with PTSD, when we get PTSD, when it becomes active, that's a sign that we are going in the right direction, that we are doing the work. And I was talking to somebody yesterday and I was talking about this work and I said, it's a lot like fitness. When we're doing all the exercise, we're doing everything and it's great. And then we have a problem because an underlying problem comes up. So we might have a strain or a sprain, we might hurt our back. And what we're doing is we're doing the work and then the weaknesses come up. And they come up in order to be healed, in order for us to go and see a therapist, a physiotherapist, to get the support to deal with that problem and then get even stronger, get even fitter, healthier, happier. Okay? So what do I use for PTSD? Well, it's very simple, but really it's about allowing the feelings to come up, allowing the fear to come up, and knowing that it is safe. I am safe to feel that fear when I wasn't safe. I couldn't feel that fear when I was younger. And so I use a mantra. It's actually from a president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in his inauguration speech said this: the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And sometimes I found when I'm having a PTSD episode, even I've had panic attacks and I know that they are very difficult. It's more than just feeling fear. It's sweating. It's almost feels like flu, with the sweatiness and the hot and cold, things like that. And it feels like really like we're letting something detox out of our body, like a virus, like an illness. And something's happening where our body is just releasing that fear. Just like with grief, we have those strange physical symptoms, and that can happen with PTSD. We can feel very disjointed. We can feel that we're living two things at the same time. So we have feelings about the distant past, feelings about right now, and they can seem so confusing. And the important thing is just to allow it to go. That was then, this is now. I am safe, and the only thing I have to fear is fear itself. Okay? And the last one is one you probably heard of. It's becoming very popular to talk about it, And there's a world of information, so I'm not going to try and teach you all about it in a few minutes. And that is imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome, it can be defined in lots of different ways. There's some very clinical definitions of it. But I always come back to somebody who talked about it, who was Maya Angelou, who was a very famous writer. And please go and look her up if you don't know who she is. A really wonderful, wonderful writer with a huge story. And she always talked about it as the feeling like when she released a new book that she was going to be found out. She was an imposter. She wasn't a real writer. And every time she published a book, she would say, got away with it, got away with it. And so sometimes we feel like a fraud. We feel like an imposter. And what I find really interesting is I recognize this feeling in myself. And I tended to just ignore it and just go through it. But it's very interesting to me, the more I do this work, that people tell me their stories about imposter syndrome. And things like, somebody told me once that she felt when she had imposter syndrome that she couldn't ask for help. Because if she asked for help, it was like saying she was an imposter. So that's really important to remember, that it's okay to ask for help. And other people have told me that feeling of imposter syndrome is so painful to them, so awkward. They hate that feeling so much that they would rather avoid getting into a situation where they could possibly feel it. Now, what I know is when I'm doing things like this, it takes me a while to feel comfortable. I feel like an imposter, but I just recognize it's something that I go through all the time. But other people will stop and say, I'm just not even going to try. I'm not even going to do it because I hate that feeling so much. So this is my mantra for anybody who finds imposter syndrome difficult. And it's just simply from Gandhi, I am being change I wish to see in the world. And I hope that gives you whatever you need to take the step, to step into any space where you might feel a bit of imposter syndrome. Like everything else. Often when we go through it, we look back and we think, that was so silly. Why did I feel like that? But these are all things that come up for us. And so we can be really helped by knowing how to deal with them, okay? Congratulations, well done. You have made it almost halfway through this series of video workshops. And like most things, it's the beginning, it's getting started, it's the warm-up that's the hardest part of all, and you've done that. You've done some of the hardest yards you can do. So well done, you've done a fantastic job, and I can't wait to see you going through to the next video workshops and to see you getting more and more further down the way, your way, to your authentic success.